At dinner, my sister announced my pregnancy without permission. Weeks later, she lied to my doctor, stole my baby's gender reveal, and embroidered a name I didn't choose on a blanket. I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said, "That is not my daughter's name." Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. For as long as I can remember, all I ever truly wanted was to be a mother. My husband, Arthur, and I, we're what you'd call ordinary people. We met in our late 20s over lukewarm coffee at a 24-hour diner and fell in love during long, meandering walks through the city park. We got married on a crisp autumn afternoon with golden leaves crunching under our feet. Our first home was a small, charming house with a yard full of more weeds than grass, but we had dreams of filling its rooms with the echoes of children's laughter. But life, as it so often does, had a different, more challenging path for us. The first couple of years of trying were filled with a kind of hopeful innocence. Each month that ended with a single, stark line on a pregnancy test was a tiny pinprick to the heart, but we'd rally. "It's okay," we'd tell each other, curled up on the sofa. "It'll happen next month." But then next month became a year. Then 2. Then 5. The hopeful, intimate act of starting a family slowly morphed into a clinical, heartbreaking routine. It became a world of sterile doctors' offices with uncomfortable chairs, of temperature charts on my nightstand, of hushed, painful conversations that we'd have in the car on the way home, neither of us wanting to look at the other. I remember one appointment so clearly. It was after another failed IUI. The doctor, a perfectly nice man but with a clinical detachment, explained the statistics in a series of graphs and charts. I just stared at the wall behind him, the cheerful poster of a smiling baby feeling like a cruel joke. Driving home, Arthur reached over and took my hand, but we didn't speak. There were no words left. The joy had been leached out of the process, replaced by a quiet, gnawing grief that became a third person in our marriage. Our social lives became a minefield. Friends we'd grown up with were having their second, even third children. We'd go to baby showers, our smiles feeling stiff and painted on. I remember one shower for a dear friend, sitting in a circle playing a game that involved guessing the flavor of baby food in different jars. Everyone was laughing, and I just felt this profound sense of alienation, like I was watching life happen from behind a thick pane of glass. A well-meaning aunt of the mother-to-be patted my knee and asked that dreaded question, "So, when are you two going to get a bun in the oven?" I just mumbled something about being focused on our careers, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. We'd come home from these events, and I'd have to go straight to our bedroom and just cry, letting out all the pent-up frustration and sorrow. Arthur was my anchor through it all. He held me during every single wave of grief and never once let his own disappointment overshadow my pain. "It's going to be our turn, Beatrice," he'd whisper into my hair, his voice a steady comfort in the darkness. I know it. We had started to seriously discuss adoption, even setting up a separate savings account for the expenses, when the impossible happened. It was a Tuesday morning. I woke up feeling different. It wasn't nausea, not exactly. It was a strange, quiet hum of awareness in my own body. I had one last pregnancy test tucked away in the dark recesses of the bathroom cabinet. I'd bought it months ago and never used it, too afraid of the familiar, crushing disappointment. But that morning, a little voice whispered, "Just try it." I didn't even tell Arthur. The hope was too fragile, too terrifying to share. I slipped into the bathroom as the morning light streamed through the window. My heart pounded a familiar, anxious rhythm against my ribs. I took the test and set it on the counter, my hands shaking. I told myself not to look for the full 3 minutes, a rule I'd broken 100 times before. This time, I was determined. I washed my face, the cold water a shock to my skin. I brushed my teeth, focusing on the minty taste, on anything other than the white plastic stick on the counter. Finally, my 3 minutes were up. I took a deep, shuddering breath and glanced down. And there it was. 2 lines. Two solid, vibrant, undeniable pink lines. I think I stopped breathing. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. I picked it up, my fingers clumsy, almost dropping it on the tile floor. I held it up to the window, turning it over and over, positive it was a trick of the light. But the lines remained, bright and unwavering. After 6 long years of stark, lonely single lines, there were 2. Tears started streaming down my face, hot and fast, but they weren't the tears of sorrow I was so intimately familiar with. They were tears of pure, unadulterated shock and joy. I stumbled out of the bathroom, clutching the test like it was the most precious object in the world, and found Arthur in the kitchen, pouring coffee, completely oblivious. He saw my face, the tears, and his smile instantly faltered. "Bea? Honey? What's wrong?" I couldn't form words. I just held out my shaking hand. He looked at the test, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened as he processed what he was seeing. Is this real?" he whispered, his own voice cracking. I could only nod, sobbing openly now. In a single motion, he closed the distance between us and wrapped his arms around me, lifting me off the ground in a hug that was both fierce and gentle. We just stood there in the middle of our small kitchen, clinging to each other, crying and laughing all at once. It was a moment of pure, fragile, miraculous happiness. Given our history, we were incredibly cautious. This little life felt like a secret treasure we had to guard. We made a pact not to tell a single soul until we were safely past the first trimester. "This is just for us for a little while," Arthur said, and I agreed wholeheartedly. We planned it all out. Once we got the all-clear from the doctor, we would invite our families over for a quiet dinner. Then, we'd give my parents a little gift box. Inside would be a pair of tiny, knitted baby shoes and a simple note, "Get ready for your new titles, Grandma and Grandpa." It was going to be our moment, a moment we had fought for, cried for, and earned through 6 years of heartache. Now, to understand how our perfect plan went so horribly wrong, you need to understand my sister, Delilah. Delilah is 2 years older than me, and she operates on a different frequency than most people. For as long as I can remember, she has required a constant, steady stream of attention. It wasn't just a personality quirk, it was like oxygen to her. Every family gathering, every holiday, every simple conversation was an opportunity for her to pivot the spotlight back onto herself. Everything was a competition, and she was always keeping score. I have so many memories of this, little paper cuts of selfishness that add up over a lifetime. I remember when we were kids, maybe I was 8 and she was 10. I had saved up my allowance for months to buy a beautiful porcelain doll. I adored it. One afternoon, I came into my room to find Delilah holding it, and she accidentally dropped it, shattering its face. When my mom came in, Delilah was already crying, saying I had pushed her and made her drop it. Her tears were so convincing, so dramatic, that I was the one who got sent to my room. She never even apologized. This pattern continued as we got older. My high school graduation was a prime example. I had worked incredibly hard and was named valedictorian. At the party my parents threw for me, surrounded by family and friends, I was just about to open my gifts. Suddenly, Delilah clinked her glass for attention. "I just want to make a little announcement," she'd said, beaming. "Mark and I are moving in together." Instantly, the entire party's focus shifted. Questions, congratulations, and excited chatter erupted, all directed at her. My stack of gifts sat unopened on the table, my academic achievement completely forgotten. My moment, a moment I had earned, was simply erased. At the time, I brushed it off. "That's just Delilah," I told myself. It happened again at my wedding. I was sharing that once-in-a-lifetime dance with my father, something I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. Midway through the song, I noticed a commotion at one of the tables. It was Delilah, of course. She was flashing a new, gaudy ring her on-again, off-again boyfriend had given her, loudly speculating if it was a pre-engagement ring. She managed to create such a stir that by the time the dance was over, a crowd had formed around her. Arthur was livid. "She can't even let you have this," he'd muttered. But I, ever the peacekeeper, just shook my head and urged him to let it go. My parents' philosophy had always been to avoid conflict at all costs, which, in our family, was code for let Delilah have whatever she wants. It was exhausting, but she was my sister. Underneath all the drama, I believed she loved me. So, I learned to adapt. I learned to keep my good news to myself for a bit, to give it room to breathe before Delilah's inevitable shadow fell over it. This is why keeping the pregnancy a secret felt so critically important. This was the one thing, the most precious, most important thing in my life, that I was determined to protect from her gravitational pull of attention-seeking. As the weeks crept by, the secret became a heavier burden. The morning sickness was real, and the fatigue was bone-deep. I had to invent a dozen different excuses for why I couldn't have a glass of wine at family dinners. Delilah, with her predatory instincts for drama, noticed immediately. She called me one afternoon, her voice a syrupy, fake-sweet concoction. "Beatrice," she cooed. "You've been so distant lately. I'm worried about you. Is everything okay?" "Everything's great, Delilah," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just been swamped at work." "Are you sure?" she pressed. "You just seem off. You barely touched your food on Sunday, and you look so tired. You can tell me if something's wrong." "Is it trouble with Arthur?" "No, everything's fine with Arthur. I'm just a bit run down, probably fighting off a cold." Each lie felt like a little betrayal of my own happiness. There was a long pause on her end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Well, okay," she finally said, her voice laced with suspicion. "Just remember, you can tell your big sister anything." I hung up the phone with a familiar sense of dread. It was like she could smell my joy from miles away and was already circling, waiting for the right moment to swoop in. Arthur came into the room and saw the look on my face. "Your sister?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I just nodded. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "We're almost at the finish line. Just one more week until the dinner. Then the secret will be out, and it'll all be fine." I leaned back against his solid frame, trying with all my might to believe him. The night of the family dinner arrived with a flutter of nervous excitement in my chest. I was 12 weeks along, and we'd had an ultrasound that very morning. We saw our baby for the first time, a tiny, flickering being with a heartbeat so strong and steady it brought tears to my eyes. The doctor assured us everything was perfect. The little gift box containing the tiny, cream-colored shoes sat nestled in my purse, a tangible symbol of our dream come true. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, Arthur reached over and squeezed my hand. "Ready to do this?" he asked, his own eyes shining with anticipation. "More than ready," I smiled back. My parents greeted us with warm hugs, and even Delilah seemed to be on her best behavior, though I noticed her eyes scanning me up and down with an unnerving intensity. Dinner was a pleasant, normal affair. We talked about my dad's ongoing battle with the squirrels in his garden, my mom's latest book club selection, and, of course, Delilah's latest minor workplace issue that she spun into an epic tale of betrayal and heroism. I kept a hand resting on my stomach, a quiet, secret conversation between me and our baby. After dinner, as my mom started clearing the plates, Arthur caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle nod. It was time. My heart started to hammer against my ribs with excitement. I took a breath, opened my mouth, and was just about to say, "Mom, Dad, Arthur and I have a little something for you," when Delilah's voice cut through the air. She stood up abruptly, a fork in her hand, and clinked it against her water glass. It was her signature move, a gesture she'd used 1,000 times to command the room. The quiet chatter died down instantly. Every eye turned to her. She had a huge, self-satisfied smile plastered on her face, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I have some wonderful, truly wonderful news to share with everyone, she announced, her voice resonating with theatrical importance. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on my parents. I know things have been a bit quiet on the family front lately, she continued, drawing out the moment, savoring the suspense she was creating. But that is all about to change. Because our Beatrice is going to give us a brand new family member. Silence. The world just stopped. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the refrigerator. I just stared at her, my mouth hanging open, the words I was about to say dying on my lips. The sentence didn't compute. How? How could she possibly know? My purse, with the gift box zipped safely inside, was on the chair right beside me. Then, my mom's hand flew to her mouth with a gasp. Oh, Beatrice! Is it true? My dad's face broke into a massive grin. A grandchild. Well, it's about time. They all turned to me, their faces radiating pure joy. But I couldn't speak. I felt like I was encased in ice, watching a scene from someone else's life unfold. I felt Arthur's hand find mine under the table, his grip so tight it was almost painful. The beautiful, perfect moment we had planned, the moment I had replayed in my mind 100 times over 6 long years, had just been ripped away from me. And it wasn't just gone, it had been handed to Delilah on a silver platter. She was the bearer of the good news. She was the hero of the story. I finally found my voice, a weak, trembling whisper that was barely audible. How did you know? Delilah finally turned her attention to me, her triumphant smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. Oh, honey, she gushed, rushing over to pull me into an unwelcome hug. I'm so sorry, I just couldn't keep it in. I had to use your bathroom before dinner, and I saw the little gift box on your dresser. I just took a tiny peek. I was just so overcome with pure joy for you, I had to share it with everyone. A cold dread washed over me. She was lying. The box had never been on my dresser. It had been in my purse, in the main compartment, under my wallet, zipped shut. She hadn't just taken a peek. She had gone through my bag. She had snooped and searched until she found my secret. The premeditation of it was breathtaking. But no one else in the room seemed to notice or care about the logistics of her discovery. They were all on their feet, hugging me, patting Arthur on the back, talking excitedly about being grandparents and aunts and uncles. The little gift box in my purse suddenly felt like a lead weight, a useless prop from a play that had already ended. The moment was over. It had been stolen, and the thief was now graciously accepting congratulations on my behalf, her arm slung around my shoulder like she was my generous benefactor. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I remember the motions, nodding, smiling, accepting hugs, but I felt utterly disconnected from my own body, an automaton running on social autopilot. Arthur was a silent, simmering volcano beside me, his jaw clenched so tight I was afraid he'd crack a tooth. His rage was a palpable thing, but he was holding it in for my sake. Delilah, meanwhile, was in her absolute element. She held court in the living room, recounting the story of her discovery, embellishing it with every telling. She talked loudly about what kind of aunt she was going to be, how she was going to spoil the baby rotten, and started speculating on names, completely ignoring me, the actual mother. When we finally managed to extricate ourselves and it was time to leave, Arthur couldn't contain himself any longer. As Delilah walked us to the door, still glowing with her stolen victory, he stepped in front of me, blocking her path. Delilah, what you did tonight was completely and utterly out of line, he said, his voice low and steady, each word laced with ice. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of theatrical disbelief. What on earth are you talking about, Arthur? I was sharing happy news. Our family is growing. You were sharing Beatrice's news, Arthur corrected her, his voice unyielding. You stole that from her. You went through her private purse, and you stole a moment that we have been waiting 6 long, painful years for. Delilah's eyes immediately welled with tears. It was her signature move, a defense mechanism she had perfected since childhood. "I can't believe you're saying this to me," she whimpered, her gaze darting to me as if seeking an ally. I was just so incredibly happy. I love my sister so much, my emotions they just boiled over. "Why are you trying to turn this beautiful moment into something so ugly?" Before I could even process her words, my mother appeared in the hallway behind us, drawn by the tension. "Arthur, that's enough," she said, her tone sharp and admonishing. "You're upsetting your sister-in-law. Delilah didn't mean any harm by it." "Didn't mean any harm?" I finally found my voice, and it trembled with a hurt so deep it felt like a physical wound. "Mom, she took our announcement. We had a plan. We had a little box with shoes in it. It was supposed to be special." "Oh, Beatrice, for heaven's sake, don't be so dramatic," my mom said, waving her hand dismissively as if shooing away a fly. "The important thing is the baby. We're all thrilled. You're making your sister feel absolutely terrible. You know how sensitive she is." I just stared at her, dumbfounded. Sensitive? What about me? What about my sensitivity, my years of heartache, my one moment of joy? It was like my feelings were invisible, an inconvenient detail in the grand family narrative where Delilah was the perpetual protagonist. My dad came up and put a placating hand on Arthur's shoulder. "Son, just let it go. In a family, you have to forgive these little things. It's not worth a big fight. We're just so happy about the baby." He was smiling, as if a few cheerful words could smooth over the gaping wound that had just been torn open. This reminded me so much of the fight over Grandma's inheritance years ago. Delilah had felt entitled to the most valuable pieces of jewelry, and when my mom suggested they be divided fairly, Delilah had thrown a tantrum until my parents gave in, just to keep the peace. It was always about keeping the peace, at my expense. We left without another word. The silence in the car on the way home was thick and suffocating. The pure, unadulterated joy from that morning felt like a memory from a different lifetime. When we walked through our front door, the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally broke. I collapsed into Arthur's arms and sobbed, a deep, ragged crying that came from my soul. I wasn't just crying for the stolen moment. I was crying for the profound, crushing loneliness of being utterly and completely misunderstood by the people who were supposed to love me most. "They always do this," I gasped between sobs. "They always protect her. It's like I don't even matter." "You matter to me," Arthur said, his voice fierce as he held me tight. "You and this baby are all that matters. And this stops now. From here on out, we do things our way. No more letting her run the show. I promise you that." It was a promise that would be tested sooner, and more horrifically, than either of us could have possibly imagined. In the weeks that followed, I tried to build a wall around my happiness. I focused on the tangible things, the baby growing stronger inside me, Arthur's unwavering support, the simple joy of picking out paint colors for the nursery. We decided that the gender reveal would be our moment of redemption. This would be our event, on our terms. We planned a small get-together with just a handful of our closest friends, the ones who had held our hands through years of infertility struggles. My family was deliberately left off the guest list. It felt harsh, but it also felt necessary. We needed to reclaim some piece of this experience for ourselves. Our 20-week anatomy scan was a magical day. I lay on the crinkly paper of the examination table, holding my breath as the ultrasound tech moved the cool, gel-covered wand over my stomach. The fuzzy, black-and-white image of our baby appeared on the screen, and my heart swelled. Then, the tech asked, "Do you want to know the gender?" Arthur and I looked at each other and grinned. "Yes, please," I said, my voice filled with excitement. The tech moved the wand around for a moment and then paused, a smile spreading across her face. "Well," she said, "it looks like you've got a healthy, very active baby girl. A girl. A daughter." I squeezed Arthur's hand, fresh tears welling up in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. We spent the rest of the day in a blissful haze, walking through baby stores, talking about names, and imagining a future with our little girl. We decided to keep her gender a secret from everyone until our small party the following weekend. This was our happy secret, and this time, we were going to guard it with our lives. A few days later, I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a spreadsheet, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my OBGYN's office. "Hi, Beatrice," the friendly voice of the receptionist said. "This is Mary from Dr. Evans' office. I'm just calling with a quick confirmation. You authorized us to send a copy of your recent file to your sister, Delilah, correct?" The spreadsheet blurred. The air in my cubicle suddenly felt thin and hot. I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice coming out as a croak. "What did you just say?" "Your sister called this morning," Mary explained patiently, though I could now detect a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "She said you were with her and that you had asked her to call on your behalf to get a copy of your latest ultrasound report. She said you needed it for some secondary insurance paperwork. We just wanted to confirm your verbal consent before we officially fax it over." My blood ran cold. "Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Did you give her any information over the phone during that call?" There was a hesitant pause. "Well, yes," Mary admitted, sounding flustered now. "She asked me to confirm the gender listed on the report, just to make sure it was the right file before we sent it." "So I did. Was that not okay?" "I'm so sorry, she was very convincing. She said you were driving and couldn't talk." A hot, sickening wave of pure rage washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. "No, Mary," I said, my voice shaking with fury I could no longer contain. "That was not okay. I was not with her. I did not authorize anything. You have just given my private medical information to a third party without my consent, which I believe is a serious violation." Mary started stammering apologies, talking about office protocols and HIPAA, but I barely heard her. The words just echoed in my head. She called my doctor's office. She lied. She impersonated me. This wasn't just a selfish grab for attention anymore. This was a calculated, manipulative, and possibly illegal invasion of my privacy. She had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. Why? Just so she could have another secret to hold over my head? So she could find another way to ruin my surprise? I hung up the phone, my entire body trembling. This was a new low, a level of deceit that was truly pathological. When I told Arthur that evening, his face, which had been relaxed and happy when he walked in the door, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He didn't speak for a full minute, he just stared at the wall. "That's it," he finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm done. I am completely done with her, Beatrice. This is not normal sibling rivalry. This is malicious and obsessive." "I know," I whispered, feeling sick to my stomach. "What are we even going to do?" "We're going to move up our party," he said, his voice full of a new, steely resolve. "We're doing it this weekend. This Saturday. We are going to call our real friends, the people who actually love and support us, and we are going to celebrate our daughter. Your sister is not going to win. She is not going to ruin this for us. Not again." A new, frantic energy took over our house. We spent the next 2 days in a whirlwind of determined planning. It felt like we were preparing for battle, not a party. We divided a list of our closest friends. "You call Sarah and Jen, I'll call Mark and David," Arthur said, already dialing. We kept the invitation casual and mysterious. "Hey, we're having a last-minute backyard barbecue on Saturday. We have some exciting news to share." Everyone, bless them, agreed to come without hesitation. On Friday afternoon, I went to the store. Pushing the cart down the aisles, I felt a defiant spark of joy return. I picked up pink paper plates, pink napkins, and a bag of pink balloons. I bought a simple vanilla cake and a tube of pink icing to write "It's a girl" on top. It wasn't going to be a fancy, Instagram-worthy event, but it was going to be ours. This time, we were in control. I was determined to make it a happy memory. That evening, we were in the backyard, stringing fairy lights between the oak tree and the porch. The air was warm, and for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely relaxed and happy. We were taking back our joy. It was in that peaceful, hopeful moment that my phone buzzed from its spot on the patio table. It was a notification from the family group chat, a chat I had muted but not yet left. My heart gave a familiar, sickening lurch. "What is it?" Arthur asked, seeing the expression on my face. I picked up the phone and read the message out loud, my voice flat and devoid of all emotion. It's from Delilah. It says, "Hey, everyone. Surprise!" I know we've all been so incredibly excited about Beatrice's little miracle, so I decided I just had to do something special. I'm throwing her a surprise gender reveal party. Tomorrow night at my place, 7 p.m. sharp. Be there to celebrate my wonderful sister and my brand new little niece. I read it a second time, silently, convinced my eyes were deceiving me. My new little niece. The possessiveness of it. The audacity. A surprise party. For me. On the exact same day as our party. This was no coincidence. She had found out we were planning something, maybe she'd heard it through the grapevine, maybe it was just her twisted intuition. This was a deliberate, strategic act of sabotage. She was hijacking our celebration yet again, forcing all our relatives and family friends to go to her event, making it socially impossible for us to have our own. If we didn't show up to her surprise party, we would be the villains, the cruel, ungrateful sister and her mean husband who snubbed Delilah's thoughtful, loving gesture. "She's boxing us in," Arthur said, his voice a low growl of disbelief. He took the phone from my numb fingers and stared at the message, his knuckles white. "This is actually unbelievable." As if on cue, the replies started rolling in. My mom was first. "Oh, Delilah, how wonderful. What a sweet, sweet idea. Of course we'll be there." Then my Aunt Carol, "Can't wait. You're such a thoughtful sister, Delilah." One by one, the cousins chimed in with heart emojis and exclamation points. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Thoughtful. They had no idea. Or maybe, a darker part of me whispered, maybe they did, and they just didn't care. It was easier to participate in Delilah's fantasy world than to deal with the fallout of her not getting her way. "We are not going," Arthur said, his jaw set like granite. "And then what happens?" I asked, my voice weary, all the fight draining out of me. "Then we're the bad guys. We're the ones who broke poor, sensitive Delilah's heart after she worked so hard to do something nice for us. You know how this works. She'll twist this into a story that makes us look like monsters, and they'll all believe her." I sank down onto one of the patio chairs, the half-empty bag of pink balloons on the table looking like a sad, pathetic joke. She had won. Again. She had outmaneuvered us, using our family's willful blindness as her primary weapon. We had no choice. We had to cancel on our real friends. We had to walk willingly into her trap. We had to go to her party and watch her play the gracious host, celebrating a secret she had stolen through lies and manipulation. The fairy lights we had just so hopefully hung up suddenly seemed to mock me, their cheerful twinkle a bitter irony in the gathering dark. Walking through Delilah's front door on Saturday night felt like walking to my own execution. A wave of sickly sweet air, a mix of perfume and baked goods, washed over me. The house was an absolute explosion of pink. There were pink balloons arching over the doorway, pink streamers dripping from the ceiling, and a giant, glittery "It's a Girl" banner hanging in the entryway. It was so over the top, it felt less like a celebration and more like a declaration of ownership. My extended family was already there, clustered in the living room, singing Delilah's praises. She has such a big heart, I heard my Aunt Carol say. To go to all this trouble for her sister. Delilah greeted us at the door with a hug that felt more like a capture. Surprise, she squealed, loud enough for the entire room to hear. I hope you don't mind. I just couldn't let this precious moment pass without a proper celebration for my little sister. She was looking at me, her eyes glittering with triumph, but her words were for the audience she had so carefully assembled. I just managed a tight, brittle smile. Arthur stood behind me, a solid wall of silent fury, his hand a protective weight on the small of my back. The entire evening was an elaborately staged performance, with Delilah as the writer, director, and star. She flitted around the room, a whirlwind of false modesty and graciousness. She told everyone the highly fictionalized story of how she found out, editing it to make herself sound like a clever, intuitive sister rather than a manipulative invader of privacy. I just had this feeling, she'd say with a hand to her chest. A powerful sisterly intuition. I just knew it was a girl. And everyone, absolutely everyone, ate it up. They praised her for being so in tune with me, while I stood there feeling like a stranger in my own life. I felt like a ghost at my own gender reveal. People would come up to me and say, "Congratulations, honey," but their eyes would inevitably drift back to Delilah, who was orchestrating every single moment. She led cheesy baby shower games, forcing me to sit in a chair in the middle of the room while people guessed the circumference of my belly with a roll of toilet paper. I felt like a prize pig at a county fair. The climax of her performance was, of course, the cake. It was a massive, professionally decorated three-tiered monstrosity, covered in pink frosting roses. "Okay, everyone, gather round," Delilah called out, clapping her hands. "Time for the guest of honor to cut the cake." She handed me a silver cake knife and steered me towards the table, placing her hand over mine as I held it. She was physically guiding my hand, ensuring that even this small act was not solely my own. I glanced at Arthur, who gave me a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent message, "Just get through this. We'll go home soon." I cut into the cake. The inside was, as expected, a vibrant, shocking pink. The room erupted in rehearsed-sounding cheers. "It's a girl," everyone shouted. Delilah threw her arms around me in another suffocating hug, whispering venomously sweet words into my ear. "Aren't you happy? Isn't this so much better than that boring little barbecue you were planning?" I pulled away from her, my face a blank mask of sheer exhaustion. I felt nothing. The joy had been so completely and methodically drained from this entire experience that all that was left was a hollow, empty ache. I just wanted to go home. But Delilah wasn't done. She had one more act in her play. One final, unbelievable power move that would shatter the last vestiges of my self-control. "Okay, everyone, settle down, settle down," Delilah announced, her voice ringing with false emotion. "I have one more surprise for the parents-to-be. A very, very special gift." A hush fell over the room. My stomach, already in a tight knot, twisted painfully. What now? What else could she possibly take? She disappeared into her bedroom and re-emerged holding a large, beautifully wrapped gift box with a ridiculously oversized pink bow. She presented it to me with a dramatic flourish, as if she were bestowing a crown. "This is something I put a lot of thought and heart into," she said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "It's something I think our whole family will really appreciate." With numb fingers, I opened the box. Inside, nestled in layers of pink tissue paper, was a soft, hand-knitted baby blanket. It was a creamy white color, and it was, admittedly, very lovely. But as I unfolded it, my breath caught in my throat and my heart stopped dead. There, embroidered in delicate, looping pink thread right in the center, was a name. Lillian. I stared at it, the 7 letters seeming to burn into my retinas. Lillian was our grandmother's name. She had passed away 5 years ago. It was a beautiful name, a meaningful name, but it was not the name Arthur and I had chosen for our daughter. It wasn't even on our list of maybes. It had never been discussed. Delilah's voice, thick with manufactured sentimentality, cut through my stunned silence. "It's for Grandma Lillian," she announced to the room, placing a hand over her heart. "I've just had this incredibly strong feeling, a spiritual connection, ever since I found out it was a girl. It's like Grandma is sending us a sign from heaven. The baby is meant to be named after her, to carry on her legacy and her name. Don't you all think it's just perfect?" She looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed, crocodile tears, the perfect picture of a loving, divinely inspired and to be. The room was silent, every eye in it moving from the embroidered name on the blanket to my face, waiting. They thought it was a beautiful, moving gesture. They saw a touching tribute to a beloved matriarch. But I saw the truth. I saw the final, audacious act of colonization. She hadn't just stolen my news. She had now tried to steal my daughter's very identity. She was naming my child. In front of our entire family, she was telling me, and the world, who my daughter was supposed to be. And she expected me to weep with gratitude, to thank her for her incredibly strong feeling. In that moment, something inside me didn't just snap. It vaporized. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing my anger, of making myself smaller to allow her to shine brighter, it all culminated in a silent, deafening explosion in my mind. The fog of shock and hurt that had clouded my thoughts for weeks suddenly cleared, and all that was left was a cold, hard, diamond-sharp clarity. This was not about her being sensitive or emotional. This was about power. This was about control. And my life as her puppet was over. I looked up from the blanket and met her gaze. My expression was so empty, so devoid of the emotional reaction she was expecting, that her perfect, saintly smile faltered for the first time all night. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass. They were all waiting for me to cry, to thank her, to play my assigned part in her production. But the old Beatrice, the one who always kept the peace, was gone. And the woman left in her place was a mother. If you're still listening, if you've followed me this far into the darkness, would you do me a small favor? Please take a moment to like this video and comment with the number 1 down below. It helps me know that you're here, that you're on this journey with me, and that my story is resonating. Your support means more than you know, and it gives me the courage to keep going. Just comment with the number 1, and then listen to what I did next. I folded the blanket, my movements slow and deliberate, and placed it carefully back into the box. I slid the box across the coffee table until it rested in front of Delilah. Then I looked up, not just at her, but at the entire room of expectant faces. My voice, when it came out, was quiet, but it was so clear and cold that it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "That is not my daughter's name." A collective, soft gasp rippled through the room. Delilah's face went from beatific to utterly shocked. "What? Beatrice, what are you talking about?" "It's a beautiful name, it's for Grandma." "I know who it's for," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength with every word. "But it is not her name. Arthur and I have already chosen a name for our daughter. A name that we, her parents, love." I stood up, and Arthur was instantly on his feet beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a feeling of power I hadn't felt in my entire adult life. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't crying. I was simply, finally, done. "You know," I said, letting my eyes sweep across the room, landing on my parents, my aunts, and finally coming to rest back on Delilah. "I have been silent for a very long time. For my whole life, I have been the one to keep the peace, to let things go, to swallow my own feelings so that nobody else gets upset. But I am not going to be silent anymore." I turned my full attention to Delilah, and for the first time, she looked afraid. "You didn't get a feeling, Delilah. You decided. Just like you decided you would be the one to announce my pregnancy. Did you tell everyone the real story? Did you tell them that you dug through my private purse until you found our announcement box?" Delilah's face turned a blotchy, pale white. "I did not. I told you, I just saw it. You're a liar, I said, my voice as hard as steel. And when stealing that moment wasn't enough for you, you escalated. You called my doctor's office. You lied to them. You pretended to be me to get access to my private, confidential medical files. You stole the knowledge of my baby's gender because you could not stand, for one single second, for me to have something that was just mine. The room was utterly, deathly silent now. Everyone was staring, their mouths hanging open. My mother took a hesitant step forward, her hand outstretched. Beatrice, honey, this is not the time or the place. This is the perfect time and the perfect place, I said, turning to face her directly. Because you are part of the problem, Mom. You both are. I looked at my dad, who looked like he'd been slapped. You have spent my entire life enabling her behavior. Every time she has hurt me, you have told me I was being too sensitive. Every time she has stolen my spotlight, you have told me to just let it go for the sake of the family. You have taught her, and you have taught me, that her feelings are the only ones that matter. You have taught her that she can do whatever she wants, without consequence, and that I will just silently take it. Well, that lesson is over. Class is dismissed. I took Arthur's hand, our fingers lacing together tightly. This is my child. This is my family. And I will not stand here and allow her to be a prop in Delilah's lifelong, one-woman theater production. We will not be coming to family events for a while. We need space from this toxicity. When we are ready to see you, we will let you know. But it will be on our terms. The custody of my child's emotional well-being is my responsibility, and I am taking it seriously, starting right now. The immediate aftermath was as predictable as it was dramatic. Delilah, seeing she had lost control of the narrative, burst into loud, theatrical, heaving sobs. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she wailed, collapsing onto the sofa like a tragic Victorian heroine. After everything I did for you. I planned this whole beautiful party. I tried so hard to make you happy, and you're just throwing it all back in my face. You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is. As if on cue, my mother rushed to her side, wrapping a protective arm around her. Shoo, it's okay, baby, it's okay, she cooed, glaring at me over Delilah's shaking shoulders as if I were a monster. My father's face had hardened, his disappointment replaced by a stern anger. Beatrice, you have made a terrible, embarrassing scene, he said, his voice low and full of condemnation. You have humiliated this entire family and you have broken your sister's heart. You owe her, and everyone here, an apology. I almost laughed. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of it. An apology? It was so deeply ingrained in them, this script where Delilah was the fragile victim and I was the cruel aggressor, that even now, faced with the cold, hard truth, they couldn't deviate from it. They refused to. Arthur stepped forward slightly. She has nothing to apologize for, Frank, he said to my father, his voice respectful but firm. If anything, you all owe her an apology for what you've allowed to happen for the last 30 years. That was my cue. There was nothing left to say. There was no understanding to be had here. I looked at Delilah, who was now peeking at me through her fingers, her sobs having already subsided now that she had successfully recaptured our parents' full sympathy and attention. There was no remorse in her eyes, only a cold, reptilian fury. I'm done, Delilah, I said quietly, speaking only to her. I'm done with the games. Arthur put his arm around my waist and began to guide me towards the door. No one tried to stop us. It felt like walking through water, pushing against the heavy weight of 30 years of family dysfunction. We passed the stunned faces of our aunts, uncles, and cousins. They looked shocked, confused, and some, I thought, even a little bit sympathetic, but not a single one of them spoke up. Their silence was its own form of betrayal. As we reached the front door, I turned back one last time and looked at my parents, who were still hovering over Delilah, stroking her hair. I have spent my entire life making myself smaller so that she would feel bigger, I told them, my voice shaking just a little with the weight of that truth. But my daughter will not have to do that. I will not sacrifice her happiness for Delilah's. Ever. Arthur opened the door, and we walked out into the cool, dark night air, leaving the noise and the drama and the wreckage of our family behind us. The click of the door shutting felt deafeningly final. The car ride home was as silent as the one a few weeks prior, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy with unspoken anger, it was filled with a sense of strange, terrifying peace. It was the silence of a bridge being burned to the ground. It hurt. It hurt in a way I didn't know was possible, to choose to walk away from my entire family. But underneath the searing pain was a solid, unwavering conviction that I had finally done the right thing. For the first time, I had chosen myself. I had chosen my new family. And whatever came next, we would face it together. The weeks that followed were quiet. At first, it was a terrible, painful quiet. I was so accustomed to the background noise of my family, the multiple phone calls with my mom each week, the constant hum of Delilah's latest drama, that its sudden absence was jarring. It left a void. There were dozens of moments in those first few weeks when I'd pick up my phone instinctively to call my mom after a doctor's appointment or to share a funny story, only to remember, with a fresh pang of grief, that I couldn't. It was a strange mourning process for people who were still very much alive. But slowly, gradually, something new and unexpected began to fill that silence: peace. Without the constant, low-grade stress of anticipating Delilah's next move, a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying began to lift. I felt lighter. Arthur and I turned all our energy inward, focusing on the three of us. We turned our cluttered spare room into a nursery. We spent an entire weekend painting the walls a soft, sunny yellow, getting more paint on ourselves than on the walls, laughing until our sides hurt. We spent an evening on the floor of the nursery, patiently assembling the crib together, the instruction manual spread out between us. These were small, simple moments, but they were ours. They were untainted. My pregnancy, which had been so fraught with stress and drama, finally became the joyous, magical experience it was meant to be. I could finally just relax and enjoy it. I would sit quietly on the sofa in the evenings and focus on the little kicks and flutters, my daughter's secret language. I fell deep into the nesting instinct, happily washing and folding tiny onesies, organizing and reorganizing little pairs of socks, dreaming of the little person who would soon be wearing them. My mother tried to breach our wall of silence a few times. She sent a series of texts, each one escalating in its emotional manipulation. The first one was simple: "We need to talk about this." I didn't reply. A few days later, another: "Your father and I are very hurt by your behavior. You are tearing this family apart." The final one came a week after that, and it was the one that sealed my resolve: "Delilah cries every single day because of what you did at that party. I don't know how you can be so cruel. I hope you're happy." Each message was a small, sharp sting. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge the validity of my feelings or the pain Delilah had caused me. It was all about Delilah's hurt, about my duty as the younger sister to forgive and forget, to smooth things over. I read each text, took a deep breath, and then deleted it without replying. Arthur and I had discussed it at length. We had made a pact: we would not re-engage with them until we received a genuine, heartfelt apology, something we both knew was about as likely as snow in July. Our lawyer friend had even given us some advice on setting firm communication boundaries, which we were now putting into practice. Our focus was singular: create a safe, peaceful, and loving environment for our daughter. We even finalized the paperwork for her college fund, a concrete symbol of our commitment to her future, a future separate from the toxic patterns of the past. Our friends, our chosen family, rallied around us in the most beautiful way. They threw us a small, perfect baby shower in our backyard. There were no silly games, no performative gestures. Just a circle of people who loved us, sharing food, laughter, and genuine excitement for our baby. My best friend, Sarah, pulled me aside at one point. "I just want you to know," she said, "we are all so incredibly proud of you for what you did." Her words, her validation, meant more to me than she will ever know. It was healing. 2 months later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, after a long and exhausting labor, our daughter was born. The moment the doctor placed her on my chest, pink and crying, the entire world fell away. She was perfect. She had a full head of dark, downy hair and Arthur's calm, steady eyes. As I held her in my arms for the very first time, all the pain, anger, and drama of the past few months simply dissolved. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was her. We named her Rowan. A name we had chosen together months before, a name that signified strength, grace, and protection. It was her name, and it was perfect. We spent 2 blissful days in the hospital, just the 3 of us, a tiny new family in our own private bubble. We didn't answer texts or calls. We just focused on Rowan, learning her sleepy sighs and her tiny, grasping fingers. On the 3rd day, as we prepared to take her home, we knew we had to inform our families. But we were going to do it our way, on our terms. Arthur took a beautiful picture of Rowan sleeping on my chest, her tiny face peaceful and serene. I typed out a short, simple, and carefully worded message. We sent it to the family group chat, the same digital space where Delilah had launched her campaign of sabotage. The message read, "Welcome to the world, Rowan. Born Tuesday morning, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Mom and baby are both healthy and doing well. We are taking this time to bond as a new family and are not accepting any visitors at this time. We will let you know when we are ready." And that was it. There was no ambiguity. We didn't give them an opening to rush to the hospital or demand to see the baby. We stated our daughter's name with quiet confidence. We set a firm, clear, and unbreachable boundary. For the first time, we were completely in control of our own family's narrative. My phone lit up almost immediately with a flurry of replies, questions, exclamations, and then, a single, solitary message from my mother that just said, "Rowan? You didn't name her Lillian?" I read the text, and to my own surprise, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a distant, quiet pity. I looked down at my beautiful daughter sleeping in my arms, and then I looked at my husband, who was watching me with so much love and pride in his eyes. We had our family. We had our peace. It had come at a painfully high price, but as I looked at Rowan's tiny, perfect face, I knew without a single shred of doubt that it was worth it. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents or my sister. Maybe one day, they'll understand the damage that was done. Maybe they won't. But what I do know, with a certainty that runs bone deep, is that I am a mother now. And my first, most sacred job is to protect my daughter's happiness and her peace. And that is a boundary I will never, ever let anyone cross again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but sharing it here, with all of you, helps in the healing process. If you've ever had an experience like this in your own family, or if you just have some words of encouragement, I would love to read them in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing for more stories. Your presence here means the world to me. Be well, and take care of yourselves.